Hi, everyone. This is the first of two techniques for digital photography. Instead of three a day, like I had mentioned, we're going to do two a day for a total of six, maybe seven if we do a third on Friday. However, right now we're doing two. And before I begin, I just want to give you the basis of, the reasons for why we're doing this. Digital photography, as you know, or photography in general, is the basis of Photoshop. So the entire industry is based upon photographs, and Photoshop experts, using the program would obviously be photographers first. They would be working for social media, marketing companies, advertising, websites, online, anything really, and digital and print. They could work for government, nonprofit, different political campaigns, etc., etc. Billboards, bus signs, anything you see out there generally has been done in and around Photoshop if it has a unique flair to it. So it is the basis. Photography is the basis for the program. And because this is an academic setting, we are using the program in an academic sense. This is not a vocational program. You're not getting certified in Photoshop. You're getting exposed and introduced to it. And a good structure and foundation to a course like this is obviously the basis of it, which is photography. So that said, something to keep in mind before we begin the two tips today is that digital photography asks, four main things are usually present in every picture and should be considered by the picture taker. One is the subject. What are you taking a picture of? Where is that object, person, place, animal in your picture? Is it in the middle? Is it on the left, on the right? That alludes to something called composition, which is basically the structure and what you put in the picture. So we're talking about large composition, could be a landscape and the balance between mountain peaks. Composition up close could be the objects on a desk. The balance in between them could be the size of each tree on the left and right of your picture frame as you're taking it. So composition matters, and that's the second one. Third one would be light and light source. So light means what kind of light is around you. Is it ambient light? Is it ugly migraine-inducing, cancer-causing, building light that we often use too much anyway? Is it ambient light, meaning is it outside? What kind of light source is coming from the outside? How bright is it? How dark is it? Is your subject facing the light and squinting? Is your subject's back to the light so they're a black silhouette and you can't see their face? All of that matters. So the light source too is, where's the light shining from? How is the light getting into that dark space? Is the light source, if I open this blind of this window, will I have a nice light source coming in to enhance my photograph? So that, keeping that in mind too. And of course, more for digital SLR cameras, which is the big, fat meaty Canons. I got one at home. Don't use it because my Google Pixel 3 is the best phone in the whole world. Anyway, they will deal with things like exposure. So you can change things like shutter speed and aperture settings to let more or less light into your photo, and that will change drastically the look and composition and feel and mood of the photo, which is also very, very important to think about. So those things are kind of the four main things: subject, composition, light, and exposure, which are kind of similar. That's why I'm talking about them. But in terms of this tutorial, we want to talk about something else, and I will start now. So digital photography crash course. Here we go. So you can see. Professionals often say they make rather than take pictures. This alludes to the composition of a picture. Very important to think about the story your picture's telling, because you can and do tell stories with pictures, and you do make a picture. Snapping your finger on a camera is easy, but if you don't think about many of these aspects, you're just going to get a generic, kind of boring looking photo. Probably your subject right in the middle, probably a person, waist up, that sort of thing. So carefully considered photographic accomplishment, for it to be carefully considered. Four elements are vital: subject, composition, light, and exposure, as we just mentioned. Number one, tip number one, technique number one, focal point. So focal point means The idea here is that it's part of an image that draws the eye of a viewer. So to the most important part of the image or the area that you want to highlight. So in this case, it's very simple. We have a match. That would be basically the focal point. How you'll do or create, compose this photo could really make or break the image. We don't just have a match. We have a background that contrasts with the color. We have this smoke trail as a leading line, leads our eyes up to a darker hue. So we have a lot going on in this picture, more than you'd think. There's also a leading line coming down, but the match itself would be the focal point. If you don't know how to create that focal point, you won't achieve much in photography, let's put it that way. Every photograph has a point of interest, and that point should be clear to the viewer. For example, butterfly. Maybe some people might say flower. Some people might notice these fuchsia marks in the background. I like the contrast, the balance of this bright pink and this light pink in the background. I like the height of the butterfly wing and the height of this flower. The green, the really nice, beautiful green all around the flowers in the background. Really well composed, nice balance, symmetrical. Butterflies the focal point, etc. Getting the idea. The viewer's eyes should not roam aimlessly around the frame. So for that example, something like this, right? We're not really roaming aimlessly around the frame. It should be guided to the point of interest, which is this, right? Maybe this is guiding us down here, this sort of in focus strip. Maybe it's the color balance. Maybe it's this guiding us down. I like the opposites here, the gray and then the gray bowl. This is a drop of water, obviously. I like the balance of 2/3 of the frame, a little more than 2/3 maybe, or a little less than 2/3 is gray, and the bottom 2/3 is green. Gray and green is a nice contrast. The opposite gray and green here, flipped upside down from the reflection, is also carefully thought out. The point should not always be in the center of the frame, though. So what we guide our eyes to should not be centered. This is not centered over here. This is off to the right. And that's the bottom. When we get into rule of thirds, that is the bottom right kind of quadrant. So where the point intersects here, where I was thinking, this point intersecting is where my eye is drawn to, somewhere around here. You'll see that in the next tip. If we don't do something like this, where we have a shot off to the side, our pictures can be kind of mundane or boring. No, there's a kitty. What makes it interesting? Just the amount of whiskers this little kitten has, but also maybe the blue and the gray nicely paired down the middle. In this case, the rule of thirds of the frame cuts right down the middle. The cat's nose and eyes draw us in, lead us down its body, and maybe we haven't even noticed the dark blue chunk over in this corner, but there we go. So the kitty draws me in. The balance of color is nice. It's well thought out. And it's not boring. But an off-balance picture or composition can be very entertaining to the eye. So this is a central, this subject is centered, almost centered, maybe a little off center over here. Or led kind of down this way, a little bit of an angle over here to the top corner, then down around again perhaps. But leading us, again, we're drawn to the eyes, I think, and this little weird little, I don't know what this is, looks like a little person with its hands up. But anyway, stuck in its head, it looks like it's probably its antenna. But here we go, huge eyes, led down the leg to another focal point that's in focus, and then I'm led along here to this little stem that he's standing on, or she. Now, this is interesting because the green here is obviously a different balance to the green there. There's dark edges to the photograph. It's really carefully composed, and obviously the camera is pretty high-end to get such a close-up picture. But again, the idea of getting closer and closer and closer. So again, central subject here, but not always. So over here, in this one, I'm looking at the bee. I'm not sure if the bee is what you'd look at first. Some people say the flower. But again, neither of them are centered. So a focal point placed just to the left of center or the right of center can guide our eye right? To explore the remainder of the frame. So here we go. Oops, sorry, guys. I'm over here on the left or the right. Sorry, I'm moving to the left to explore the flower. Maybe I start over here. I move to the right to explore the bee. Either way, one leads us to the other. Doesn't have to be in the center. If it was in the center, something would be lost in terms of composition. It's colorful. It's nicely balanced. Its color is not too intense on either side. So where secondary information such as weather and the environment can be used to round out the mood or fullness of the shot. So here we have the sky, obviously, the clouds, the blue, just really nice summer photo. And by contrast, we have something disgusting like this. But at the same time, a motto of photographers is often sort of closer, get closer sort of idea is sort of a mantra of photography. So the closer you can get, the better, and it usually holds up. So what I mean by that is this picture is of a pile of cancer in an ashtray of some sort, obviously, but there is something fascinating about it. I mean, I don't know if anybody else cares. You guys are maybe not there yet. I don't know, but I think this cigarette butt is actually in the frame. This is the one in focus. This is our subject. We're led all over the place eventually, but the idea of these up close, there's so many ways to look at it. Looks like a little sea of cigarette butts, a little sea of death. But here we go. Interesting photo, unique take on it, and of course, getting as close as possible was the key to making this interesting. Remember, a photograph doesn't have to be beautiful; it has to be interesting. You make it, you don't take it. Baby bird, right here. The reason that this one is aesthetically pleasing is it kind of follows the golden mean here, which is that everything, any spiral kind of circular representation on one of those rule of third focal points really gives us a sort of aesthetically pleasing nature to the eye. So it sounds interesting. It sounds weird, but it's true. And I'll show you photos in the second tip. You'll see all kinds of stuff and examples of that idea. But baby bird, orange, yellow mouth, red mouth here, contrast with the gray. It's a stark contrast. The bird's in focus. The nest isn't. Parts of the nest are, so our eyes are drawn around the nest in a circular way. All of that is on purpose. We are meant to be led this way. And the focal point starts with the nice bright orange with the gray background. So that appeals or alludes to focal point. Another part of it is making your object of your shot stand out. This bird stands out, obviously. It's the only thing with color. If you can't get closer physically, use a longer lens if you can. Zoom in with your phone, etc., etc. And think, what are you trying to say with an image? If you're making a photograph of a farmhouse on the prairie, you have to make sure that the farmhouse and the prairie are both in the photograph. You have to make sure that they're large enough so that people can see what it is. But it shouldn't fill so much of your picture frame that the viewer loses a sense of the environment. I used to live in Saskatchewan, and those photographs or those moments where we did stop at old, scary-looking haunted farmhouses in the middle of a field of yellow with a dark gray purple sky from a thunderstorm, and that composition is amazing because the farmhouse is dark gray, the field is bright yellow, and the sky is dark purple. So you can imagine the colors going on there. But if I was to get too close to the farmhouse or too close to the prairie or sky, something else would lose. So all three have to be balanced. All three have to be balanced and included so the viewer is led and the picture itself tells a story. So again, back to one of the other composition techniques or things to be aware of is light, right? Light source. Here's a low light. This could be early morning. It could be almost dark. We don't know. The leaf is obviously the subject. The circular pattern of the stump appeals to our eye. It's aesthetic. The purple light is interesting contrast to the red. The log or the stump here kind of takes on a color of its own, a violet. And light was carefully considered when they composed this photo. They may have placed the leaf, but who cares? It's a nice photo. Again, light source. This one's got a tiny bit of overexposure, but that's okay. The plant itself, I think it was taken as the design of the plant with the leaves sticking out like this, the interesting look of the plant curled around the sun. Obviously, they weren't taking a picture of the plant. It looks more like they were taking a picture of the sun or the surrounding area. But this black silhouette and the mountain or the trees over here looks like maybe it's definitely an elevated area, but the shadow of the lake shore might be somewhere over here is reflected, right? So you've got this sort of silhouetted area. So the sun being framed by the plant is actually the focal point, I believe. And the plant's, green wasn't relevant in this. It was the silhouette that the photographer was going for. But carefully composed, interesting. We have a sense of the environment. It's foggy. It looks like it could be early morning. Just a nice photograph. Another one. This would be aperture and shutter speed being used to make these streaks of white, but the light, the dragonfly in the rain, obviously, or shaking its wings. I think it's more in the rain. But the light was carefully considered in this photograph too. Obviously, a beautiful composition, really smartly done, and with a really high end camera. But just sometimes it's just really nice to look at them. But the focal point, the leading line, I'm led from the dragonfly. Awesome colors here, looks amazing, and up its wings into the rain, and then I'm kind of starting to notice the streaks over here and the streaks over there, and it's just really well done. And just the detail on the wings is pretty awesome. Again, composition, colors at play here. Somebody thinking about color, somebody thinking about light. This didn't have to be necessarily in the middle. One suggestion, it could have been over on the side, it could have been down in the corner, would have the same effect. But still, interesting. Just really soft light in a forest. More likely, this wasn't placed. You come across stuff like this sometimes. I used to tree plant, so I'd see stuff like this a lot, but usually the whole animal and all its ribs and everything. But just really nice moss, gray, dull background, bright greens, always a nice contrast. This subject here, I believe this is a subject. This is not centered in the photo frame. It's counterbalancing this rock back here. The play between the two is nice. You have its symmetry, its balance. It's nice to look at. Interesting picture. Tells a story too, doesn't it? And that's the whole point. It's made, not taken. Here's just a foreground picture. The locks are the subject. The dog gets our attention, but not necessarily the subject of the photo. But the focal point are the locks. And this is just an example of using a focal point in the background and using the foreground to kind of blur it out. You kind of get an idea it's a little dog, obviously, but not a little person or not an Ewok. However, you are kind of drawn to the top of his head. You look at the locks, then you're all over the place. Maybe you noticed over here, Hunter and Tyler and Tammy. The idea, though, is that it draws us back to the locks and around. We got quite a history and story here with these locks and who put them there and why, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a smart idea to kind of use a foreground tool to make us look back into the back of the picture. Again, another play on it. This is Kitty Cat, maybe the kitten, 10 years older. Green, gray, foreground, busy, but the eyes are just intense. That cat's about to kill the crap out of something, I think. But we're led there. The eyes are beautiful, and the cat's in focus. The plant is a nice green, the lime green in the background. I'm not sure I'm too fond of the front part here, but if I cut this off, do I lose something? It would put the cat in the bottom right corner. Maybe not. I may have more of the green I might take away from it. It doesn't hurt the photo. It just maybe doesn't enhance it. Foreground purples. This beautiful set of tulips here. The concept that there's more, there's a lot more to see that we don't see that's blurred out, but focusing on these colorful ones in the middle is kind of cool with these purple on either side, give the composition balance. They also frame the focal point, which is in here. So using stuff like that is always a good way to take a picture. just the detail in the leaf is amazing. But leading us through, again, in a circular motion, kind of, along this way. Oh, look over here, look over there, follow the stem. Again, smart photography, but just unique takes on everyday things. If this is just a picture of a leaf, no one would care. Okay, and that brings us to our second tip, which we will begin in a moment.